These slides will help us get a little bit deeper into thinking about higher order cognition and what it looks like in the classroom and the ways that students are asked to engage in higher order thinking through the tasks that we design and the questions that we ask and the lessons that we teach. Just to get us started thinking about it, I believe it was Johanna, mentioned this in our Collaborate session last Wednesday, that there seemed to be some connections between the 7 features of the system that we presented in the content of this course related to higher order cognition and Bloom's taxonomy. And I think that's an important idea to address because there are a lot of connections between the ways higher order cognition has been conceived of and the way it's been described and broken down. Something that we've started to highlight and feature in our discussions over the last 4 weeks is that there's a lot of overlap between these distinctions that are drawn within the systems of neurodevelopment as they're presented. So in terms of language, we were seeing in the quiz, for example, overlap between the idea of semantics and discourse. You use semantics to engage in discourse. Discourse is often reliant upon an understanding of words, but it's not exclusive to the understanding of words. So while there are distinctions, there's also really important connections. And these kinds of connections also show up in ways of thinking about higher order cognition. So in this slide, you can see some of the genesis of the ways higher order cognition has been conceptualized, discussed, and presented. So here we have, I'll use this cursor as a pointer, Bloom's taxonomy's old version, the original 1956 version. And that had these features of evaluation, synthesis, analysis, application, comprehension, and knowledge. Well, as Bloom's was updated and a new version was created and presented in the 90s, now we see evaluation is shifted. We see creating at the top, and then it's followed underneath by evaluating, analyzing, applying, understanding, and remembering. So these ideas have a lot of connections, but are framed and presented slightly differently to represent the way that people are thinking about cognition at this point. The way that research has developed, the way that understanding students and adults' thinking has developed, and the way the concept itself has been pushed upon and shifted. Then we have Webb on the far right side, and here we have extended thinking, strategic thinking, skills and concepts, and recall and reproduction. And if we think about it, this bottom layer, recall and reproduction, now that's quite similar to remembering, but it's also somewhat distinct. Remembering might be closer to recall. You could make an argument for reproduction connecting to remembering, but you could also make an argument for reproduction being entirely distinct from remembering. So one thing to think about in terms of these kinds of taxonomies and ways of breaking down higher order cognition is that you can use what you see in the development of these concepts to inform the way you're thinking about what you're seeing in the classroom with students or what you're hearing teachers talking about if you're working with peers or working directly with teachers. So it's not that one of these is right and the other ones are wrong or the old ones need to get thrown out, but rather it's the development of an idea that's really interesting to chart as we look over time. And then if you look on the bottom, we kind of take this more current pyramid on the left, Webb's, and then connect it here to what we're seeing in the way that the neurodevelopmental system of higher order cognition is presented in this course, and we see some connections there as well. So we see extended thinking, that's really connected to critical thinking, creativity and brainstorming, problem solving. And then strategic thinking, you could think of as you're using strategic thinking for problem solving and for rule use. Reasoning and logical thinking have connections as well. Mental representation is a way that often people use their recall and reproduction, that they access that for themselves. And then concept formation, we don't see as much represented in these pyramids, but it's something that's pulled out in the content of this course, the way that we talk about higher order cognition. So that's something, I was talking about this last week in the Collaborate session, to kind of think about playing around with these ideas a bit, playing around with the way that we introduce concepts and work on concepts with students in the classroom, but also the very construct of higher order cognition itself is something that you can kind of manipulate in your mind and think about in a flexible way to see what's the most useful way of framing it for yourself so that it informs your direct work with students in the classroom or with teachers if you're working in professional development format. This next slide, please download these after you listen to this mini lecture, and then on this slide you'll find links to these 3 classes that we're asking you to watch video of and then discuss in this week's discussion forum. And this week's discussion forum is broken into K4, 5 to 8, and 9 to 12. For people who are working directly with teachers, please make a selection about which of those grade levels you'd like to focus on most. And in these lessons, you'll have an opportunity to think about the way Common Core-oriented lessons connect to higher order cognition at school. So once you've watched the video, please go back to the Moodle page and click on the discussion forum that it matches and respond to these prompts. One is, what connections to the 7 features of higher order cognition can you identify within these lessons? And then take a step back and see if you can think about your own practice and overall, how do the Common Core standards relate to higher order cognition? After that, you can click on this link, or there's already a link posted on the Moodle page for this article, How to Increase Higher Order Thinking. And your second assignment for this week is a response to this article. So in that, we ask you to describe 2 learning activities you can incorporate into lessons in your classroom that would support higher order cognition. For each activity, please include a brief description of the activity itself, how the learning activity connects to your content area or grade level and topic, and then what features of higher order cognition the learning activity will support. I hope you have fun with these activities, and I look forward to seeing your assignment responses for this week.